You think you know betrayal? You think you understand what it feels like to have your entire world ripped away by the very people you built it for? Imagine staring at the front door of the home you poured your life, your sweat, your every single dream into, only to have it slammed shut in your face. Not by a stranger. Not by some random act of fate. But by your own son. Your own wife. You'd think family means forever, that love is unconditional. But you'd be wrong. Because what happened next, what unfolded in the quiet suburbs of a town that once felt like paradise, would challenge everything you believe about loyalty, about gratitude, and about the crushing weight of sudden, unimaginable wealth. I had no idea that simply working hard, that simply loving my family, would lead to my son becoming rich, and then to this. My son and wife kicked me out after he became rich. What I did next shocked them. And by the end of this story, you'll never look at your own family the same way again. Remember that feeling? That deep, comforting warmth of a life meticulously built, brick by painstaking brick? That was my world. For 30 years I was John. Just John. A mechanic. A husband to Sarah. A father to Michael. We weren't rich, not by any stretch of the imagination. But we were rich in something far more precious. Connection. Love. Laughter that echoed through our modest 3-bedroom house, especially when Michael was little. I can still smell the faint scent of engine grease on my hands, mixed with Sarah's home-cooked meals. I can still hear the distant rumble of the train, a comforting lullaby that had put Michael to sleep since he was a baby. Every rusty bolt I loosened, every late night I spent under a hoisted car, it was all for them. For us. I envisioned a future where Michael wouldn't have to struggle like I did. A future where Sarah could finally take that trip to Italy she always dreamed of. My purpose was clear, unwavering. Michael, even as a kid, he was brilliant. Not in a textbook way, but in a way that saw the world differently. He'd sit for hours, tinkering with old electronics I brought home from the shop, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't want sports, he wanted circuits. He didn't want video games, he wanted to make them. Sarah and I, we fostered that. We bought him every book, every cheap circuit board, every half-broken device we could afford. We scrimped and saved, often going without ourselves just to nurture that spark in him. We saw a future, a different future for him, and we were willing to sacrifice everything to help him reach it. You know that feeling when you're so incredibly proud of your child? It swells in your chest until you think it might burst? That was me every single day with Michael. And Sarah, she was his biggest cheerleader. She'd bake him his favorite cookies for his late-night coding sessions. She'd listen intently to his complex explanations of algorithms, even if she only understood half of it. We were a unit. A rock-solid, unbreakable team. Or so I thought. The signs were subtle at first. A new laptop, more powerful than anything we'd ever owned, appearing on Michael's desk. Late-night phone calls in hushed tones. Then a sudden, almost frantic energy about him. He was building something, he said. A new app. A game. He was vague, but his eyes shone with an intensity one hadn't seen before. It's going to be big, Dad, he'd say, a rare smile gracing his lips. Really big. Sarah and I were thrilled. We encouraged him, of course. Work hard, son, I'd always told him. Good things come to those who put in the effort. We didn't understand the technical jargon, but we understood ambition. We understood dedication. Little did we know this ambition would be a wedge. This dedication, a precursor to a betrayal so profound it would shatter our very foundation. Then the explosion. It was almost overnight. One morning, Sarah burst into the kitchen, her eyes wide, holding her phone. "John, look," she shrieked, half laughing, half crying. Michael's app. It had gone viral. Not just popular, but a global phenomenon. Millions of downloads. Investors clamoring. News outlets featuring him. Our son. Our quiet, brilliant Michael was a sensation. You can imagine the euphoria. We cried. We hugged Michael, almost crushing him with our pride. This was it. All those years, all those sacrifices, they had paid off. Michael was set. We were set. We pictured new beginnings. A comfortable retirement for me, maybe that trip for Sarah. Our son had achieved the impossible. We truly believed our lives were about to change for the better, together. But then things started to shift. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. Michael moved out into a lavish apartment in the city. "I need my own space, Dad," he explained, "for meetings for the team." Of course we understood. He was a CEO now, a young titan. He started dressing differently, speaking differently. His calls became less frequent. His visits even rarer. When he did visit, he brought expensive gifts, designer clothes for Sarah, a fancy watch for me. Gifts that felt transactional, not from the heart. I remember holding that watch, feeling its cold, heavy weight in my palm. It was beautiful, undeniably. But it didn't feel like him. It felt like something he thought I should have, not something he wanted to give. Sarah, she was just happy. She saw it as a sign of his success, of his generosity. "He's just busy, John," she'd say, brushing away my concerns. "He's making a name for himself. He'll come around." The day he pulled up in that gleaming black luxury car, it was like a scene from a movie. Our humble driveway, usually home to my beat-up work truck, now hosted a machine worth more than our entire house. He looked at our home not with nostalgia, but with something I couldn't quite place. A detached appraisal. As if it were an artifact from another, less significant life. This was the first time the title, "My son and wife kicked me out after he became rich," truly began to echo in my mind. "Dad, Mom," he announced, a forced cheerfulness in his voice, "I'm buying you a new house. A real house. In the hills. This place, it's just not suitable anymore." My blood ran cold. Not suitable? This was our home. Our sanctuary. The place where he learned to walk, where we celebrated every birthday, every small triumph. "Michael," I said, my voice tight, "this is our home. We love it here." Sarah, however, her eyes were shining. She walked over to him, touched his arm. "Oh, Michael, darling. Are you serious? A house in the hills." Her response, so quick, so eager, felt like a punch to the gut. That was the first crack in the foundation. The first moment I truly felt something had shifted irrevocably. We moved. Sarah was ecstatic. The new house was enormous. Marble floors, a sprawling kitchen, an infinity pool. It was everything we had never dared to dream of, and yet, it felt empty. Hollow. Michael barely visited. When he did, he'd walk through the rooms like a landlord inspecting his property, not a son visiting his parents. He'd bring his new friends, flashy people who barely acknowledged me, and they'd talk about things I didn't understand, didn't care about. Sarah changed too. She started buying designer clothes, hosting lavish parties for people she barely knew. She stopped cooking, relying on caterers. She started talking about our new life, about fitting in. The old Sarah, the one who laughed at my corny jokes and loved a quiet evening on the porch, she was fading. Replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone whose eyes sparkled when Michael talked about his latest business deal, but dimmed when I tried to talk about my day at the garage. I tried to talk to her. "Sarah," I'd say, "don't you miss our old life? Our old home?" She'd just wave a dismissive hand. "John, don't be ridiculous. This is what we worked for. This is what Michael built for us." But it wasn't what we worked for. It was what he built, and in doing so, he was dismantling everything we had. One evening, after another soulless party, I finally confronted her. "This isn't us, Sarah. We're losing ourselves in all of this. We're losing Michael." Her eyes, once so full of warmth for me, hardened. "You're just jealous, John," she spat. "You're jealous that your son is more successful than you ever were. You're jealous of my new life." Jealous? Of Michael? My own son? The boy I had given everything for? The words hung in the air, thick and poisoned. That was the moment I realized the chasm between us was no longer a crack. It was a gaping maw. And Michael, our brilliant, successful son, was the architect of it all, even if he didn't realize it. Or maybe he did. Then came the meeting. Michael called us to his office, not his home office, but his corporate steel and glass office downtown. Sarah was beaming, excited. I felt a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. He sat behind an enormous desk, a king on his throne. Sarah sat beside him, looking up at him with adoration. I was across from them, feeling like an employee awaiting his termination. "Dad," he began, his voice devoid of emotion, "Mom and I have been talking. And we've decided it's time for you to move out." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. My son, saying this to me. Move out. I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about, Michael? This is our home." Sarah finally spoke, her voice surprisingly firm. "It's Michael's home, John. He bought it. And he feels you don't fit in with his new image. With our new image. My son and wife kicked me out after he became rich." The truth, stark and brutal, finally hit me. They weren't just asking me to leave a house. They were asking me to leave their lives. To leave the family I had given everything for. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an annihilation. But why? I managed, the single word heavy with all the unasked questions, all the broken promises. Michael simply stared at me, his face impassive. "Dad," he said, his voice flat, "we've moved on." You haven't. You're holding us back." I looked from my son's cold, unfamiliar face to my wife's hardened gaze, and I knew in that gut-wrenching moment that the life I had known was over. They handed me a small envelope, severance they called it, a paltry sum for 3 decades of my life. As the heavy oak door of what was once my home closed behind me, shutting me out into the pouring rain, I thought I had lost everything. My family, my future, my very identity. But as the first drops of rain hit my face, washing away the tears, a strange feeling began to stir within me. Not despair, not defeat, something else entirely. A spark, a dangerous, burning ember of defiance. Because they had no idea. They had absolutely no idea what I was truly capable of. And what I did next, after my son and wife kicked me out after he became rich, would not just shock them. It would make them question everything they thought they knew about me. And themselves. You won't believe what happened next. I looked at that envelope in my hand. It wasn't money. It was a check for a few $1,000s, a final insult, a paltry sum for a lifetime of love. It was then that a strange calm settled over me. There was no going back. This wasn't a temporary hiccup. This was a permanent eviction from my own life. And I had 2 choices. I could let it destroy me, or I could build something new from the wreckage. I chose the latter. I used that small check as a down payment on a small commercial garage, a rundown place on the other side of town. The air smelled of old oil and rust, a familiar, comforting scent. I spent my days and nights there, not just fixing cars, but fixing something in myself. I worked harder than I ever had, not to build a future for them, but to reclaim my own. I wasn't just fixing engines anymore. I was building a new foundation. A foundation of independence, of dignity, of self-worth. One day, a young kid came by, a college dropout named Alex, who had a passion for old cars but no money for school. He reminded me so much of Michael before the money changed him. I took Alex under my wing, not just teaching him mechanics, but teaching him the values I had always believed in. Hard work, honesty, and that true wealth lies in the relationships you build, not the dollars you accumulate. In Alex, I found the son I had lost. And in that little garage, a new family. My business, now renamed John & Sons Auto, began to thrive. People appreciated the honest work, the fair prices, and the personal touch. The more I built, the less I thought about what I had lost. I was finding joy again in the simple things, in the smell of sawdust and grease, in a hard day's work, in the quiet camaraderie of my new apprentice. Little did I know, the whispers of my success were beginning to reach the very people who had cast me aside. One afternoon my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered it anyway. "Hello," I said. There was a long silence and then a hesitant voice. "Dad? It's Michael." The sound of his voice, after so long, was like a ghost from another life. He wanted to meet. He was a different person on the phone, his voice tinged with a subtle desperation I had never heard before. He wanted to meet me at a cafe near my old home. I met them. They were different. Sarah's designer clothes looked expensive but ill-fitting, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. Michael, my once brilliant son, looked tired. "Dad," he started, "we've been seeing the news about your business. It's impressive." I just nodded, not saying a word. I had nothing to say to them. What could I say? Thank you for kicking me out and destroying my life? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Then Michael's composure broke. He confessed. The pressure of his wealth, the demands of his company, the shallow relationships he had formed, it was all a facade. He was miserable. He missed the old life. He missed the love and support that money couldn't buy. Sarah, too, admitted her own loneliness. The lavish parties were empty, the friends were fake, and the house felt like a prison. They were surrounded by everything but had nothing. The title of my story, "My Son and Wife Kicked Me Out After He Became Rich," was not a story of a happy family's success. It was a tragedy of how greed and ambition destroyed a family from the inside out. "I want to come back, Dad," Michael said, his voice cracking. "I want to be your son again. We want to be a family again." I looked at them and I saw a flicker of the people they used to be. The loving son, the supportive wife. But they were only flickering. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too raw. I had forgiven them in my heart, but I couldn't forget. "You can't come back to the man I used to be," I said softly. "He's gone. The man who lived for you, who sacrificed everything, he died on the night you closed that door on him." I stood up and looked at my son and wife. "The man you see now, he built a new life, a new family. And for the first time in a long time, he is truly happy. I don't need you to be my family anymore, but I will always love you, and I will always be your father." And so I walked away. Not in anger, but in peace. I had found my true worth, not in a bank account or a mansion, but in the sweat on my brow and the love I had rediscovered for myself. I didn't need their validation or their money. I had something far more valuable, a clean conscience, a loving apprentice, and a life I had built on my own terms. What I did next shocked them. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a clever plan to get my money back. It was simply living my life. It was a lesson to them and to me that some things are more precious than wealth, and that true happiness can't be bought, it has to be built. This story, my friends, is not about money. It's about a man who lost his family but found himself. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest betrayal can be the greatest blessing. It can force you to see your own strength, to build something new from nothing, and to redefine what it means to be happy. So I ask you, what would you do? If you were kicked out of the life you built, what would you do next? Would you let it destroy you, or would you rise from the ashes and build a life so beautiful it would shock them? Comment your thoughts. Let's talk about it. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell icon because I've got more stories just like this one that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you for watching.